I never thought I'd end up working the night shift at a nearly forgotten airport in Kansas. It wasn't one of the big ones, not the kind with bustling travelers, flashing billboards, or endless security checkpoints. No, this was a regional airport, tucked away in flat, endless farmland where the wind blew so hard it carried dust across the runways like sheets of sand. Most flights had long since been cut, the place barely alive with a few incoming and outgoing planes during the day. At night, it was dead quiet, or at least, that's what I thought before I learned the rules. I had taken the job out of desperation. Bills were piling up. My last job at the hardware store had ended badly, and my options were slim. When I saw the ad for a night attendant at the airport, simple duties, good pay, no prior experience required, it felt like a blessing. The hiring process was quick, too quick, almost like they didn't care about who they hired. They just needed someone who was willing to stay there when the sun went down. On my first night, the manager, a man named Davis, met me at the security desk. He was pale and heavyset with watery eyes and a nervous habit of biting the inside of his cheek. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in years. He didn't shake my hand, didn't even welcome me, just pressed a laminated sheet of paper into my hand. "These are the rules," he said flatly, like a man repeating a prayer he no longer believed in. "Follow them exactly. Don't improvise. Don't test them. You'll understand soon enough." I laughed, thinking it was some kind of workplace joke, but he didn't even crack a smile. He looked at me with an intensity that made my stomach tighten. I glanced at the sheet. The rules were typed out neatly with numbers, bold print, and some parts underlined in red ink. I'll never forget them. 1. Never look directly at the runway lights after midnight. 2. If you hear knocking at the terminal windows, do not investigate. 3. Between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m., patrol the baggage claim, but do not pick up any luggage that wasn't there before midnight. 4. If you see a plane land between 2:15 and 3 a.m., do not approach it. Call the number written on the desk phone and wait for further instructions. 5. Keep every bathroom door closed and locked at all times. If you find one open, shut it immediately without looking inside. 6. If you hear your name whispered on the intercom, do not respond. 7. Never stay inside the control tower after 3:30 a.m. Leave it locked behind you. At the bottom, in red letters, was the last line. Failure to follow these rules may result in termination or worse. I remember staring at Davis, expecting him to grin and tell me it was a prank. Instead, he rubbed his temples and muttered, "Don't ask questions. You'll see." Then he left me alone in the terminal. The building itself was small, with just one main hall, a couple of gates, a baggage claim carousel, and the security checkpoint that nobody really used anymore. At night, it felt cavernous, every footstep echoing like I was walking in a cave. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, some flickering like they were struggling to stay alive. The big glass windows looked out onto the runways, nothing but blackness stretching beyond them. That first night, I paced the floors with my laminated rule sheet in my pocket, telling myself it was just superstition, some weird initiation for new employees. But around midnight, when the building grew unnaturally silent and the air seemed colder, I felt the weight of those words pressing on me. It began with the runway lights. The airport kept them on all night, little glowing beacons stretching in perfect lines into the distance. At 12:10, while I was checking the security desk, something compelled me to glance out at them. Immediately, my chest tightened. The lights weren't steady anymore. They pulsed, almost like they were breathing. Red, white, but too fast, too unnatural, like a heartbeat. I felt dizzy just staring at them. A whisper, faint but sharp, tickled my ear. "Look longer." I stumbled back, nearly falling over the chair. The paper crumpled in my pocket as I remembered the first rule. Never look directly at the runway lights after midnight. My skin prickled all over, and I forced myself to turn away. The whispering stopped instantly. That was the moment I realized the rules weren't a joke. The next test came not long after. At 12:45, I heard the sound of tapping, like knuckles rapping against glass. At first, I thought it was the wind, but when I walked into the gate area, I froze. The sound was coming from the massive terminal windows that overlooked the runway. Knock, knock, knock. Steady, deliberate. My heart pounded. I wanted to look, to see who or what was knocking, but the second rule screamed inside my head. Do not investigate. So I stood there, every nerve in my body tight, staring at the opposite wall instead of the glass. The knocking grew louder, faster, almost frantic. Something wanted in. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. I stood frozen for what felt like hours before daring to breathe again. When I finally turned my head slightly, the windows were dark and still, but I swore I saw faint handprints pressed against the glass, fading as if they'd been burned there. By 1 o'clock, I was shaking, but the rules demanded I patrol baggage claim. My shoes squeaked on the polished floor as I walked down the deserted hall. The carousel sat still, silent, a black belt that hadn't carried a bag in years. Except tonight, something was different. A suitcase sat at the edge of the belt. It was large, dark red with a torn handle. I was sure it hadn't been there earlier. The air around it felt heavy, like the atmosphere before a storm. My first instinct was to grab it, move it aside, but I remembered rule number 3. Do not pick up any luggage that wasn't there before midnight. So I kept my distance. But as I turned to leave, I heard it. A soft shuffle, like fabric shifting inside the suitcase. Then a thud, like something knocking from within. I froze. The suitcase rattled violently for 3 seconds, then went still. I backed away slowly, every breath loud in my ears, until I was out of the baggage area. I didn't look back. By the time I reached the security desk again, it was 1:40. My nerves were shredded, my throat dry. I wanted to quit right then, to walk out and never return. But I thought of the paycheck. I thought of my empty fridge at home, the bills stacked on my table. I forced myself to stay. At 2:20, I saw headlights. Through the window, a plane rolled silently onto the runway, its lights cutting through the fog. But it wasn't scheduled. I knew the flight schedule. There were no arrivals at this hour. The engines made no sound. The landing gear touched down without even a squeal of rubber. It was impossible. I remembered rule number 4. If you see a plane land between 2:15 and 3 a.m., do not approach it. Call the number on the desk phone. My hands shook as I grabbed the receiver. The number was taped beside it. I dialed, half expecting no one to answer, but after 2 rings, a voice came on. You saw it? The voice asked. It was low, gravelly, and calm, like someone who had been expecting my call. Yes, I whispered. Stay inside. Do not go near the gate. Wait until it leaves. I wanted to ask who they were, but the line went dead. Out on the runway, the plane taxied slowly toward a gate. The doors of the terminal creaked, as if something was pulling them from the other side. I couldn't see who or what was inside the plane, and I didn't want to. I crouched behind the security desk, heart slamming in my chest, praying that the doors would hold. After what felt like hours, the plane's lights flickered, then went out. When I peeked through the window again, the runway was empty. The plane was gone, as if it had never been there. I didn't breathe easy again until 3, and even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had walked through the terminal while I hid, something I hadn't dared to look at. That was my first night at the airport in Kansas. By the time the sun came up, I was pale, exhausted, and trembling. Davis returned at 6 sharp. He looked at me, at the sweat on my forehead, and simply said, "You followed the rules, didn't you?" I nodded. "Good," he muttered. "Most don't make it past the first night." And then he walked away, leaving me to wonder what kind of place I had signed my life away to. The second night felt worse than the first, because this time I knew what was waiting. I didn't walk into the terminal thinking it was some quirky initiation ritual or a stupid joke. I walked in knowing that the rules weren't suggestions, but survival instructions. I got there a little before midnight, just as the last employees were leaving. The janitors wheeled their carts out of the hall, nodding to me with tired faces, and the day shift security guard muttered, "Good luck, kid," like he was sending me off to war. When the doors locked behind them and I was alone again, the silence hit me like a wall. Airports aren't meant to be silent. They're supposed to be filled with voices, footsteps, and the constant hum of engines. But here, at night, it was suffocatingly still. Every sound I made echoed too loud, like the building itself was listening. I set my bag down at the security desk and pulled the laminated sheet of rules out of my pocket. I read through them again, even though I already had them memorized. They were the only lifeline I had in this place, and I clung to them like scripture. At 12 sharp, The runway lights flickered on. I didn't look at them. I kept my eyes fixed on the desk, even though the glow bled in through the windows, tugging at me like a magnetic pull. I thought I heard that same whisper from the first night, but I forced myself to hum quietly under my breath until it faded. Rule 1 kept me safe. But the rules weren't designed for comfort. They were designed for endurance. Because right after the lights came the knocking. At 12:20 it started. Faint at first, a little tap-tap like raindrops, but the sky outside was clear, and I knew better than to believe it was weather. The knocking grew louder, sharper, insistent. I clenched my fists against my thighs, fighting the urge to look. Knock, knock, knock. It followed me. No matter where I stood in the terminal, it seemed to come from the closest window, as though something was pacing me from the outside, waiting for me to slip. I pressed my back to the wall and closed my eyes. I counted my breaths. I told myself over and over again, do not investigate. Do not investigate. Then, through the silence, a voice came with the knocking. Let me in. I froze. My heart stuttered in my chest. The voice was low and smooth, muffled by glass, but still clear enough to make the words unmistakable. Please, let me in. It's cold out here. I bit my lip so hard I tasted blood. I wanted to run, to hide, but my legs wouldn't move. Knock, knock, knock. Why won't you look at me? I just need help. Just look. The air turned frigid. My breath fogged in front of me. My body begged me to turn my head, to glance at the window just for a second. But the rules screamed inside me like alarms, and I clamped my eyes shut. The voice grew angry. You hear me. I know you do. Don't ignore me. Don't you dare ignore me. The glass groaned under pressure, like a storm battering against it, and the knocking turned into pounding. For a moment I thought it would shatter, and then I swear, I heard nails scratching across it, long, jagged claws dragging across the pane. And then it stopped. Just like that, silence fell again. When I opened my eyes, the windows were still intact. The night outside looked ordinary, black and endless, but my body wouldn't stop shaking. I don't know how long I stood there, waiting for the pounding to come back, but it never did. At 1 o'clock, baggage claim awaited. I walked there with my chest tight, dreading what I might see. Sure enough, the carousel was running this time, slowly rotating with a low mechanical hum. That alone was wrong. The system should have been off for the night. On the belt, suitcases moved in a steady line. I counted them. 9. None of them had been there before midnight. The rules were clear. Do not pick them up. Do not touch them. But watching those bags circle around and around felt unbearable, like each one was bait set out for me. Some were old and scuffed, plastered with faded airline stickers from cities I'd never heard of. Others were brand new, glossy, untouched. A small pink child's suitcase passed by, and I swear it rattled like something was inside. Then halfway through the loop, one bag caught my eye. It was different from the others, tall, black with a silver tag hanging from the handle. Unlike the others, it wasn't circling the carousel. It sat at the very end, unmoving, as if waiting for me. I took a step back, ready to leave when I saw the tag. My name was written on it. Not just my first name, my full name, middle included, written in neat block letters. The air in the room felt suddenly thick, like breathing through wet cloth. I stumbled backward, my pulse slamming against my temples. I hadn't told anyone here my full name. Nobody at this airport should have known it. The suitcase shifted, just slightly, like something inside had adjusted position. I bolted. I didn't even finish my patrol. I ran back to the security desk and sat there, shaking until my throat burned from panting. At 2:15, I dreaded what might come next. And like clockwork it came. The lights of another plane appeared out of the black sky, drifting silently onto the runway. Its descent was flawless, too perfect, and when its wheels hit the ground, I didn't hear a sound. I remembered the phone. My trembling fingers dialed the number taped beside it. This time, the same gravelly voice answered instantly. You see it? Yes, I whispered, barely holding my breath steady. Don't go near it. Not tonight. Stay where you are. I wanted to ask questions again, but I couldn't bring myself to. The words stuck in my throat. Out on the runway, the plane rolled to a stop. The door opened. From where I crouched behind the desk, I couldn't see what came out, but I could hear it. Footsteps, dozens of them. Heavy, synchronized, like boots on tile. The terminal doors groaned, just like the night before. The handles rattled. Then, for the first time, I saw shadows pass across the frosted glass of the entrance. They were tall, too tall. Their heads brushed the top of the doorway, their limbs unnaturally long and thin. They didn't come in. Not then. The doors strained against their weight, but something kept them out. I stayed hidden until the shadows finally moved away. When I dared to look again, the plane was gone. So were the shadows. I thought I'd survived the night until I heard the intercom crackle to life. "Attention, please. Will the night attendant report to Gate 2? The voice wasn't human. It was warped, stretched like a recording slowed down and sped up at the same time. And it had used my name. I froze. Rule number 6, if you hear your name whispered on the intercom, do not respond. The speaker popped again, static rushing like waves. Then, clear as day, "We can see you." My blood turned to ice. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But where could I go? I pressed myself against the desk, clapping my hands over my ears. The intercom went silent. I stayed frozen until I saw the clock tick past 3:30. My eyes darted to the control tower on the far side of the terminal. Its windows glowed faintly, even though I hadn't turned on the lights. Rule 7 rang in my head like thunder. Never stay inside the control tower after 3:30 a.m. Leave it locked behind you. But I hadn't gone inside at all. So who was in there now? I didn't wait to find out. I locked the desk drawers, grabbed my bag, and stood frozen until the horizon began to glow with pale dawn. When Davis arrived at 6, I didn't even try to hide my panic. My face was pale, my hands shaking. He looked me over, sighed, and said, "You came back. Good. Most don't." He didn't ask me what I'd seen. He didn't tell me what was in the tower or why the suitcase had my name. He just clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder and muttered, "Keep following the rules, or next time, it won't let you go." I wanted to quit. I wanted to leave that cursed place and never return. But the paycheck hit my account that morning, and it was more money than I'd ever made in my life. Enough to cover rent, groceries, and then some. So I told myself I could survive another night. But deep down, I knew I was lying. By the third night, I realized something important. Fear wasn't the worst part of working here. It was the waiting. The hours before midnight dragged like wet cement, and the silence pressed in on me from every angle. The hum of the vending machines, the buzz of the ceiling lights, the creak of the metal doors. It all reminded me I was alone. Except I wasn't. Not really. I thought about quitting all day before my shift. I even sat in my car outside the terminal, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt. My mind screamed at me to drive away, leave the job, the paycheck, the rules behind. But my body betrayed me. I walked in, clocked in, and sat at the desk like I'd been programmed. At 11:59, I read through the rules again. My lips moved silently with each line, as if speaking them out loud might protect me. I glanced at the control tower in the distance. Its windows were dark tonight, but I didn't trust that meant it was empty. When midnight hit, the runway lights flickered alive. I kept my gaze locked on the desk. I hummed, louder than before, to drown out the whisper that slid into my ear again. "Look, just look, it's beautiful." I bit my tongue until the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. The whisper hissed in disappointment when I didn't obey. The knocking started 10 minutes later, but this time it wasn't just at the windows. It came from the doors. Not the main entrance, but the staff doors at the far end of the hall. The ones that led to empty maintenance rooms and old storage closets. The sound was sharp, deliberate, like fists hammering on wood. Bang, bang, bang. I froze. There wasn't a rule about that. The laminated sheet said nothing about knocking on doors. Only windows. My throat tightened as I tried to think. Was this a trick? A test? The banging grew louder, shaking the metal frames. I clenched the paper in my pocket so tightly it crumpled. My gut screamed at me to stay put, but curiosity dug its claws into me. I stood, slowly, step by step. I walked down the corridor, each bang rattling the air harder than the last. My breath came fast and shallow. When I reached the staff doors, the noise stopped. The hallway fell silent, except for my own heartbeat. The air smelled stale like rust and mildew. My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling. That's when I saw it. The knob twisted on its own, slowly, deliberately. I staggered back, my chest seizing. The door creaked open an inch, just enough for me to see darkness on the other side. No sound, no movement, just darkness, thick and heavy. Then a hand slid out. It was pale, almost gray with fingers too long, bending at odd angles like broken sticks. Its nails scratched across the floor as it groped blindly, reaching. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet. The rules hadn't prepared me for this. I didn't know what to do. The hand stretched further, pulling the door wider. Another hand followed, then an arm. The thing's skin looked thin, almost transparent, with veins pulsing faintly beneath. I bolted. I ran back to the desk, slammed the emergency door control, and prayed. The mechanism groaned to life, locking every staff entrance with a heavy click. The sound echoed through the hall, and the pounding resumed instantly, furious this time. Bang! 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 The walls shook. I sat behind the desk, squeezing my eyes shut until my temples throbbed. After 10 minutes, the noise stopped. I didn't move for half an hour. When 1 o'clock came, I almost couldn't bring myself to check baggage claim, but the rules didn't allow hesitation. Breaking the pattern might be worse than facing what was waiting. The carousel was running again. 3 suitcases this time. One was old, leather, with brass clasps. Another was small, dented metal, like a toolbox. The third made my stomach drop. It was the same red suitcase I'd seen the first night. Torn handle, same place on the belt. Only this time, it wasn't still. It was shaking violently, jerking against the edges of the conveyor like something was thrashing inside. A muffled sound leaked from it. Crying. Not an adult. A child. A thin, pitiful sob echoed through the empty hall. Help! Help me! My knees buckled. Every fiber of me wanted to sprint forward, tear the suitcase open, save whatever was inside, but the rules hammered against my skull. Do not touch the luggage. The sobs grew louder, turning into wails, desperate and broken. The suitcase banged against the edge of the carousel like a trapped animal. Please, please let me out! I pressed my hands against my ears. Tears burned my eyes. My whole body screamed at me to move, to do something, but I stayed rooted to the floor. Then the voice changed. It deepened, twisting mid-word into something guttural, inhuman. Let me out. The suitcase split, not open, split. The seams tore like skin, and something pushed from within. A black, shapeless mass, writhing, pressing against the fabric. I ran. I didn't look back. When I reached the desk, I collapsed against the chair, gasping for air. My body trembled so violently I thought my bones might break. At 2:15, the familiar glow appeared in the sky. Another plane. I dialed the number. My voice shook as I whispered, "It's here again." The gravelly voice responded, "Stay hidden. Don't let them see you." "Who are they?" I asked, finally forcing the question out. A long pause. Then, "Passengers." The line went dead. I crouched beneath the desk, peeking through the cracks in the counter. The plane landed silently. Its door opened, and this time I saw them clearly. They poured out in a line, tall, emaciated, their limbs too long, their heads tilted at unnatural angles. Their skin hung loosely, like it didn't quite fit their bodies. Their eyes, if they had eyes, were hollow pits that glowed faintly, like dying embers. They moved in unison, their footsteps clicking too perfectly, as if rehearsed. The terminal doors groaned. The glass shivered. I held my breath, praying they wouldn't come in. Then one of them stopped. It turned its head toward me. Straight at the desk where I crouched, it tilted, as if listening. I buried my face in my arms, biting my sleeve to stop from screaming. After a moment, the sound of footsteps resumed. When I looked again, the runway was empty. The plane was gone. I almost broke then. My body wanted to quit, to run screaming into the fields and never look back. But the intercom crackled before I could move. This time the voice was soft, familiar. "Hey, it's Mom," I froze. The voice was hers, perfect, gentle, the same way she used to call me when dinner was ready. But my mother was dead. "Come to gate 2, sweetheart," it cooed. "I made your favorite. Don't you want to see me?" My stomach lurched, my throat closed. The intercom hissed, then whispered my name over and over, each time more distorted, more grotesque, until it didn't sound like a name anymore, but a growl. I curled into myself and waited for it to stop. At 3:30, the control tower light flickered on again. This time, I couldn't ignore it. Through the glass, I saw a figure standing inside. Not moving, just watching. And I swear, even from that distance, I knew it was smiling. I didn't sleep after the third night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the knocking, or the suitcase crying, or the scrape of those long fingers against the floor. When I did drift off for a moment, I dreamed of hollow-eyed passengers stepping off silent planes, their mouths opening wider and wider until they swallowed the world whole. By the time I dragged myself back to the airport for my fourth shift, I felt hollowed out. My body was present, but my mind clung to the edges of reason. I kept whispering the rules under my breath like prayers, afraid that if I forgot even one, the airport would consume me. Davis was waiting for me at the desk. He never did that before. "You're still here," he muttered, his bloodshot eyes scanning me like I was a specimen under glass. "That's rare." I didn't answer. I just tightened my grip on the laminated rules. He leaned in close, the smell of stale coffee and cigarettes rolling off him. "Remember, they'll try harder now. They know you're not breaking, but everyone cracks eventually." I wanted to ask him what happened to those who cracked, but before I could, he turned and left, his heavy footsteps fading into silence. At midnight, the runway lights pulsed again. I forced my gaze down, but the whisper was different this time. "Look, or we'll come inside." My chest tightened. I hummed louder, but the whisper only grew angrier, a hiss, a threat. My throat burned as I fought the urge to look. When the clock hit 12:15, the whisper faded, leaving behind a silence even heavier than before. Then came the windows. The knocking started softly like fingertips, then palms, then fists. But when I refused to turn, it shifted. Scratching. The sound of nails dragging down glass echoed through the hall, sharp enough to make my teeth ache. I clenched my jaw, gripping the edge of the desk until my knuckles burned. And then, something new. A reflection moved across the glass. Not mine. I caught it out of the corner of my eye, distorted by the shine. A tall shadow walked along the row of windows, even though no one was outside. It stopped right where I sat, pressed against the glass, and leaned forward. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its gaze, hot and searing, like a spotlight burning into me. "Please," it whispered, voice muffled by the glass. "I'm so lonely in here." My blood turned cold. In here. The scratching stopped, the shadow drifted away, and silence returned. At 1 o'clock, I dragged myself to baggage claim, every step heavy with dread. The carousel was already running, carrying 4 suitcases this time. One of them was the same black case with my name on it. The silver tag gleamed under the fluorescent light. I stayed back, hugging the wall, whispering the rules. "Don't touch it. Don't touch it." But the tag flipped as it rotated past. My stomach flipped with it. It no longer had my name. It had my brother's. I nearly collapsed. My brother was alive, but far away in another state. He couldn't possibly be connected to this. But the letters were clear, neat, unmistakable. The suitcase jolted as it passed me, like it knew I was watching. I fled. I didn't even finish the patrol. At 2:15, the sky lit up again. Another plane. I didn't even bother pretending it wasn't coming. I just dialed the number and whispered, "It's here." The gravelly voice answered instantly, "Stay hidden." But I couldn't help myself this time. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why are you helping me?" The line went silent. "Then I worked there once." My heart dropped. Before I could ask more, the line clicked dead. I crouched beneath the desk, peeking through the cracks again. The plane touched down silently, rolled to the gate, and opened its door. The passengers poured out again. Same towering forms, same hollow eyes. But this time, one didn't move with the rest. It stopped. It turned its head slowly, as if listening. Then it stepped toward the terminal doors. The glass shivered. The handle rattled. And then, without warning, the door unlocked with a loud click. Panic surged through me. I slammed the emergency lock system again, but it didn't work this time. The doors groaned open, just an inch, and a freezing wind swept in. The figure's head pushed through. Its face wasn't hollow like the others. It had a mouth. A wide, jagged grin that stretched far too long. Its teeth were thin and sharp, like needles. Its eyes burned red, glowing like hot coals. "Found you," it whispered. I shoved myself deeper under the desk, heart hammering so loud I thought it might give me away. Then the intercom crackled. "Attention, passengers," it crooned. "Gate 2 is now boarding." The others turned in unison, their heads jerking toward the sound. They shuffled back, filed into the plane, and vanished into the night. The grinning one lingered. Its head swiveled toward me again, slowly, patiently, and then it smiled wider, teeth glinting, before stepping back into the dark. When I looked again, the runway was empty. At 3:30, the control tower light flickered on. My stomach dropped. I knew what was coming. A figure stood there again. But this time it wasn't just a silhouette. It was me. Same uniform, same posture, same face. It watched me from the tower window, unmoving, expression blank. And then slowly its lips curved into a grin, identical to the passengers. I stumbled back, choking on my own breath. When the dawn finally came, I didn't wait for Davis. I ran to my car, peeled out of the lot, and didn't stop driving until I was miles away. But the whole time, I felt eyes on me. When I pulled into my driveway, exhausted and shaking, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. For a split second, it smiled at me, and I hadn't moved my lips at all. The next night, the air was heavier than before, almost suffocating, as if the very oxygen inside the terminal had thickened into something unnatural. I walked in through the staff entrance, my badge trembling in my hand. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights above my head sounded more like a swarm of angry insects than electricity. My body screamed at me not to step further inside, but my mind reminded me, if I didn't show up, if I didn't follow the rules, something worse would come for me. The rules had been my lifeline, but now they felt like chains. I knew I wasn't just working at an airport. I was serving something else, something older than the concrete, older than Kansas, older even than human memory. That night, the board displayed a new flight, Flight 77. Destination, Oblivion. The departure time flickered as 3:33 a.m. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it. This wasn't a place. It wasn't even a word meant for humans. Oblivion was finality, the end of everything. Who could possibly be boarding such a flight? At precisely midnight, I heard the dragging of shoes against the polished floor. Turning, I saw them again. Passengers with faces like melted wax, eyes sunken in, their clothes decades old. Some held suitcases that dripped water, leaving wet stains on the carpet as if they had just come up from the bottom of a river. Others carried cages covered with black cloth, things inside them squirming. None of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence carried meaning all on its own. I was supposed to check their tickets. My trembling hands accepted slips of paper from them, tickets written in a language my eyes couldn't hold for more than a second. Whenever I looked too long, my vision blurred, and I saw the letters twist into shapes that resembled screaming mouths. I stamped them anyway, avoiding the urge to look further. One man stopped at the desk, unlike the others. He wore a pilot's cap from the 1940s, and his skin was pale, tight against his skull. His smile was too wide, stretching unnaturally. His voice was like gravel dragged across steel when he spoke. "You've been doing well," he rasped, staring at me. "You'll serve one more night, won't you?" I couldn't answer. My throat locked up, but I nodded, and he passed, dragging behind him a suitcase that moved as if alive. The PA system above clicked on without anyone touching it. A voice I didn't recognize announced, "Flight 77 now boarding. All passengers proceed to Gate 12. I froze. Gate 12 didn't exist. The airport had only 11 gates. Yet when I glanced toward the far end of the terminal, there it was, Gate 12, lit by a pale green glow, the numbers painted in symbols that hurt my eyes. I shouldn't have followed them, but my feet dragged me there, pulled by something I couldn't fight. The passengers filed in silently, one after another, disappearing into a doorway that wasn't meant for this world. Beyond the gate wasn't a jetway. It was a swirling darkness, a storm of shadows and red lightning. Each figure vanished into it, their bodies swallowed whole without resistance. I should have turned back. I should have closed my eyes and run. But when the last passenger stepped through, the PA voice returned. "Attend the final boarding. Do not delay." The order wasn't directed at them. It was directed at me. The green glow thickened around me, dragging my body forward like a rope tied around my chest. My legs resisted, but every step felt like walking into wet cement. As I neared the gate, the darkness inside pulsed like a heart. I could hear whispers rising from it, thousands of voices overlapping, pleading, laughing, screaming. Just as I was about to step through, a hand grabbed my arm. I turned sharply, expecting another shadow passenger, but it was someone else. An old janitor, his wrinkled face filled with terror. His eyes darted from me to the gate. "Don't go in there," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Once you do, you'll never come back. That's not a flight. That's a harvest." I tried to speak, but the whispers from the gate drowned my words. The janitor gripped me tighter. "Listen to me. Follow the rules if you must, but never, never obey the final boarding. His voice cracked with desperation. They're using you, feeding on you. Before I could ask more, the gate pulsed again, and the janitor was gone. Not walked away. Gone. His hand slipped from my arm as if he had never been there at all, leaving only the smell of cleaning chemicals lingering in the air. The silence that followed was worse than the whispers. My entire body shook as I stared into the abyss of Gate 12. My name echoed from within it, not once, but again and again, whispered by countless voices. I didn't step forward. Not yet. But I knew the time was coming when the rules wouldn't let me refuse. And when that time came, I feared I wouldn't have a choice. I didn't sleep the next day. My body refused to let me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the green glow of Gate 12, the swirling darkness, and the endless faces calling my name. The janitor's warning repeated in my head like a curse: never obey the final boarding. But the rules had always been clear. Disobeying them wasn't an option. I'd seen what happened when the wrong door was opened, when the wrong announcement was ignored. The airport punished rebellion. Still, for the first time, I thought about breaking them. When night fell again, I returned. My chest was tight and sweat dripped down my back, but I swiped my badge and stepped inside. The building groaned as if it had been waiting. The lights flickered, and the air smelled of burnt wires and rot. Tonight, the departure board was blank at first. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd been spared. But at 1 a.m. sharp, the letters began to flicker into place, one by one. Flight 77, Gate 12, departure 3:33 a.m. The letters didn't stop there. Below the listing, new words appeared. Final boarding required, staff. I froze. The meaning was obvious. The airport wanted me to go. My hands shook as I clutched the desk, my knuckles white. I wasn't just watching anymore. I wasn't checking tickets. I was the ticket. At 2:30 a.m., the passengers arrived. They came in greater numbers than ever before. Their forms were more grotesque, some missing limbs, others crawling, dragging their torsos across the floor, leaving trails of black sludge. Their faces were hollowed, their mouths stretched too wide. And yet, they carried their tickets, presented them calmly, waiting their turn like ordinary travelers. I stamped them with trembling hands. My vision blurred more each time, and the letters looked like teeth gnashing on paper. My mind screamed for me to run, but my body kept working, like I was just another cog in their machine. At 3:15 a.m., the pilot returned, the same skeletal man with the cap, his grin stretching across his face. He leaned over the counter, his dead eyes burning into mine. "Tonight," he whispered, "you come with us." I couldn't answer. My lips wouldn't part. He chuckled, a low rasping sound that made bile rise in my throat, then turned and strode toward Gate 12. The intercom crackled. That same inhuman voice spilled out of it, hollow and commanding. Final boarding now commencing. All passengers and staff proceed to Gate 12. The words echoed through me, vibrating in my bones. I felt something inside me pulling forward. My legs moved without my permission, step after step, dragging me toward the gate. The glow was brighter now, nearly blinding. The voices were louder, calling my name, calling me to join them. I remembered the janitor's words: never obey the final boarding. But how? My body wasn't mine anymore. I clawed at the walls as I passed, my nails breaking, blood smearing across the white paint. I bit my tongue until I tasted iron, desperate to snap out of whatever spell had me. But nothing stopped my march. Closer and closer I got. The gate wasn't just a swirling storm anymore. It was opening, widening like a mouth, hungry and waiting. The air sucked toward it, pulling everything closer, bending the lights, rattling the glass windows. I screamed, though no sound came. My arms thrashed, my legs kicked, but the pull was stronger. My badge snapped off my shirt, sucked into the vortex. My body leaned forward, the black storm pressing against my face like 1,000 cold hands. Then something happened. The lights above exploded with a bang, plunging the terminal into darkness. The green glow flickered, weakening. For the first time, the gate faltered. I fell backward, slamming into the ground, free from its grip. I gasped for air, crawling across the floor as the vortex roared in frustration. The whispers became screams. My name was shouted by thousands of mouths in unison, shaking the walls. I crawled until my fingers touched the staff entrance door. I pulled myself through, slammed it shut, and collapsed on the cold concrete outside. Silence. When I looked up, the building was still. The lights glowed normally. The departure board was empty. Gate 12 was gone. It was as if nothing had happened. But I know it wasn't over. The rules aren't gone. They're inside me now. I still hear the voices sometimes, in the hum of the fridge, in the rustle of trees, in the static of the TV. They whisper the same message over and over. Final boarding required. I don't know how long I have left before they come again. Maybe another night, maybe another year. But the rules never stop. And when the call comes again, I don't think I'll be strong enough to refuse. And that, night owls, is where my story ends for now. But the truth is, I don't think it's really over. The voices are still out there, whispering, waiting, reminding me that one day the final boarding will come for us all. If you've stayed with me through the dark halls of this Kansas airport tonight, I want to thank you. Your support means more than you know. It's the only light I have in nights this cold. So if you felt the chill, if the story pulled you in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It helps this little night owl family grow, and it lets me know I'm not alone in the dark. Until next time, keep your eyes open, keep your heart steady, and remember, some rules aren't meant to be broken. Good night, night owls. Stay safe, stay awake.